the relationship starts from the basis of trust. And we kind of know this, but the question we often don't ask is, how can I actually build trust with this customer on a weekly basis?
Hello Sales Nation, I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, and welcome to today's episode. On today's show we have Jermaine Edwards, and we're talking about the steps to differentiate yourself from the competition and to dive deeper in and become more involved with the big accounts that we all have that we probably don't spend enough time with. You can find out more about Jermaine over at JermaineEdwards.com. And if you're in the UK, I just want to bring your attention to Jermaine's upcoming conference. It's called the Customer Growth Summit. You can find out more about that over at customergrowthsummit.com. There's a bunch of people that regularly come on this podcast who are speaking there, and so it's well worth checking out. And with all that said, let's jump into today's episode. Hey Jermaine, and welcome to the Salesman podcast.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, Will. Thanks.
Good stuff. I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to dive into this topic. And I want to start by playing a little bit of devil's advocate. You've listened to the show before, so you know this happens. And this will set up the conversation for the rest of the show. But it might sound like a daft question, but I know the audience will be thinking this as well, of if they get their commission when the deal's closed, when the customer comes on board, what's in it for them? And we'll talk big picture, I guess, at this point. But what's in it for them to take the time to deepen that relationship with the customers, to build rapport with them, and spend more time in that account?
Well, it depends on the role that they have. Naturally, I mean, if you're in an enterprise role or literally a BD role, then you're commissioned on a really specific basis to bring in that revenue. So if you're in a farmer position, then obviously the stakes get a little higher, because that recurring revenue model or the targets for recurring revenue from that customer become much more pertinent, much more specific, and much more real for that individual. So the relationships at any stage, I don't think anybody would disagree, are important to, I guess, the positioning of how you can accelerate the relationship and actually the profitability from that as well. But from a farmer perspective, I can speak from that perspective, is really just talking about how you begin to amplify that relationship so that you're able to sell more profitably, and actually get them to like you in the process.
And is there I'm always looking for processes and step-by-steps, and I don't want to dumb things down, but is there a defined step-by-step process to use your words, amplify that relationship with a current customer and get deeper with them?
Yeah, I do believe that there are particular steps that you can take. So I share some of these things inside my book, but just to kind of offer some examples. So amplifying the relationship starts from the basis of trust. And we kind of know this, but the question we often don't ask is, how can I actually build trust with this customer on a weekly basis? What are the daily implications of that for me as a sales rep, as a sales account manager, whatever that might be? And one of those things that we often take for granted is this place of being able to empathize with our customer. So what does it mean to really to get into a position where they believe that you care enough for them to share something different with you than they haven't done before? And really the position for an account manager is just that, is getting your customer to share something with you that they hadn't done before, so you can get to a place that you haven't been before. And I think empathy, being able to demonstrate care, being able to demonstrate that you can move from a place of self-interest into their interest on a regular basis, and being able to demonstrate that daily, will put you in good stead for amplifying that relationship.
So I think there's two things to got here. One, the structure and the timing and the congruency of getting in touch regularly after a deal's been closed. I think that's a massive thing that I've missed out on in the medical device days. I never focused on that enough. I feel like there was just business on the table that I missed because I was too happy to go and chase other prospects. We can talk about that in a second. But something you said then, which really intrigued me, what's an example of a customer sharing something new which can deepen a relationship?
Yeah, for example, so I think what we often take for granted is that at any point in time in our relationship, if you can take the example of just being in a relationship with a girlfriend, you're never going to know everything until you get married. And I think it is similar with the customer. You're kind of on this journey together and you finally got married. You're in this place, and now on a continual basis, you're communicating and realizing there are things you just don't know. But sometimes there are things that your customer hasn't told you because they aren't ready to give you that information, or you aren't in that place. So an example of that could be, and I'll give you an example of something recently with a client I was working with. They had a particular customer, I should say, that they've been working with for 5 years. And for 5 years, this customer had bought the exact same way. Almost, if you could look at a kind of a y-x axis,
Mhm.
they were at kind of almost a horizontal line in terms of how much they spent with that organization. And so we went through a process of simply just evaluating where that relationship was, being honest with it. And the thing that they recognized, but they just hadn't asked one specific question with this customer that would have given them a different answer. And that question was really simple. And it was, what do we need to do differently with you now to add value that we haven't yet done for you before? And as soon as they asked that question, all of a sudden they began to get different answers around their capabilities or the possibilities of that potential customer. So that's just kind of one example of that in action.
That's amazing. Are there any? Because I can feel my sales brain like going off in a million directions here. But to just stay on this for a second, are there any other one-liners perhaps like that which are just as useful? Because I think almost every single person listening, once they've closed a deal, could ask the prospect or the now customer that question and have mega benefit from it. Are there any other key phrases or key questions that we should be asking?
Man, there are tons. I'll give you a few more right now. So another question that I really like to ask customers right at that kind of early stage process is, if we were to start the process again and add even more value to the proposal, what would that look like? And then just write that down, get some understanding of what that is, and then begin to build it in later for upsell possibilities or cross-sell possibilities. Another potential question would be, who in your departments right now would equally get value from this proposal if we added this one thing? And you can name a department and then get these cross-sharing communications taking place. So there's a number of different kind of questions like that you can ask.
It's brilliant because this answers a question that I was going to ask, which came up previously of how do you contact a customer every week or whatever the number of times and that cadence needs to be to build that relationship without sending that horrible email or that horrible
Oh
phone
my
call of,
gosh.
hey, I'm just checking in. And this kind of answers that a little bit. But are there any other ways or strategies to go about doing that? Because, of course, once a deal is done, if you're selling software, for example, and the customer is now using it, there's an opportunity to find out how they're going with the software and that kind of thing, but that dries up pretty quickly, and then you're you potentially in a position where you're pestering them, and there's not much upside for them until they've spent time with you. How can I put it? They've got to invest into you and your questioning for you to be able to give them value. So, is there any way to lessen that burden and allow you to give, for example, value up front with these weekly questions or weekly emails rather than you having to just ask questions which suck a little bit of value first?
Yeah, oh man, there's tons I can share here. So let me just start with just two things. So one, I think it's really important that sales reps, account managers learn to set expectations right up front with their customer. So what I mean by that is, if you say to a customer, "Hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, I typically on a weekly basis send this type of email or this type of value based on the type of product or services that you've bought from me. Is this something that you usually have? How do you usually like to be communicated to? What kind of value would be really helpful in the process of us building a relationship together?" And get their agreement up front. So when the email arrives in their inbox, all of a sudden your open rate goes up, and there's an expectation of them knowing that value is coming on a weekly basis. So if you know that you have that content and you can deliver on a weekly basis, then set the expectation up front so there's no misunderstanding, or there's no, as you put it, kind of burden of becoming what I call kind of human spam in the in the inbox of or phone dial of your customer. Excuse me. But another thing there that you may want to think about, particularly for the viewers, is thinking about how you actually deliver value and what the purpose of that value is. Because if the call is simply to understand what else you can sell, then you've kind of missed the point altogether. And I think customers immediately know and recognize what those calls sound like and look like. So here's another way to frame it. If you do have the opportunity to call your customer, you simply call up and say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, I was thinking about something the other day, and I thought of you. I was going to send it to you via email, but I thought I'd like to discuss it with you first before sending to see how relevant it would be." And then all of a sudden you're in dialogue, and then you frame whatever that value is and send it to them afterwards. And there's a higher propensity or higher chance for them to read that afterwards. That's just kind of one or two different examples.
Fantastic. And I think I know what your answer is going to be on this, but are you saying that we should have some kind of email list that goes out to all of our customers once a week, or should these be bespoke emails to each individual person on a one-to-one basis rather than a one-to-many?
So, I mean, I'd like to believe that everybody has the greatest CRM and automation tools on the planet, but it's just not the case. So, I'd say that any level of individualization, personalization you can put in is going to be well received and well noted in the results that you'll get. Again, it goes back down to purpose. So, if you know what the call to action is, you know what you're driving specifically, then I'd say you would need to add that personalization because they need to hear your voice in that email, and it needs to be congruent with how you usually communicate with them. So absolutely, it needs to be personalized. If you have an automation tool, then make sure it's preset just to kind of read and it be experienced like you are over the phone. If there is any incongruence in that, then you're likely to have a customer that just doesn't get the sense of having a relationship with you and seeing two different people.
Definitely. And so, Jermaine, how do we get deeper with all of this? So the answer might simply be to ask better questions. So week and week is a deeper, more thoughtful question and an opportunity for you to add more value on the back of that question. But getting really practical with this, what should we be doing week on week to make sure that we're not just at this single level, that we're adding enough value that we can bring in more business, whether it be a month or a year or whenever the opportunity arises? But how can we 100%, if we can, how can we 100% be sure that this relationship is getting stronger and stronger over time, rather than it just being a friendship that just plods along?
Yeah, well, I do believe that kind of trust is on a continuum in that relationship, and so there are different stages in which you will go through in order to really find or evaluate where you are. So it starts with just being really honest, and you can ask yourself a question right at the beginning of the week and just say, how would I honestly describe the relationship I have with my customer right now in terms of the quality of our communication, in terms of how they respond when I ask them for a price increase, how willing they are to refer me, how often we discuss things that are outside of the context of business that still adds value to both of us. How well I'm known inside the business through their own internal referral networks. I think there's a checklist that you can actually personalize for yourself and ask yourself that question on a monthly basis to move that forward. But also going back to expectations, just say, Mr. Customer, here's who we are as a business. We believe in moving relationships forward. Part of that means, I'm going to be as open and as transparent to you about who we are as a business. And as we move forward, I expect and know that you'll be reciprocating because that's the kind of person you are. And you want to frame that right from the beginning so that you're looking for a truthful and honest relationship. And as you go through and ask really tough questions, and if they hesitate, then you're not quite there. But the more they open up as you go along, you're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And to get really practical again, what would be perhaps a short-term, a medium-term, and a long-term goal for I understand that it's quite a generic big audience of B2B salespeople that we're addressing here, and myself included. But would a short term perhaps be so that the manager knows who you are, the medium like a referral, and then long term to close more business from the account? How would you set that up yourself if you had a new account that you were nurturing?
Yeah, indeed, that's a great question. So I think the first thing I'd actually do is, on a Monday morning, whatever it might be, I'd write down a list of the major challenges that my customer has. And I'd write all those things down and I'd decide, okay, what are the major challenges? What are the things they're most excited about? Where are the things that we add value? Where are the things we've promised? Where haven't we promised anything that we can add more value to? And I'd list those things down. And then what I'd do is I'd use those as markers to how I begin the conversation. So short term would be, how well do I know the person in front of me? Do I know their wife's name? Do I know their children's names? Do they know my wife and children's names? Are we at that personal level? The second medium term might be, do I know their fears and concerns? Do I know where they want to go in terms of their own career and progression in their own company? And how am I contributing to their success? So can I mark that? So if I know that they want to be seen as someone who's innovative and influential, how am I enabling them to become that person in that business? And then a long-term goal may be, well, I actually want to be in the circle of influence of every single major C-level person that they know. And so on that long-term basis, I'm being introduced on a regular basis to those people. And then once I am in that connection, I can tick that off my list and move on to the next one.
So this is amazing, Jermaine. So this concept of helping them in their own career as an individual is something that I think is massively overlooked. I think most of our conversations as sales professionals are along the lines of, this product is going to help your company do this, and then kind of as a random offset, you will probably look quite good at some point because profits will go up or costs will go down, or turnover will change, whatever the effect that they're trying to get. How powerful is this? Because of course you've got more practical kind of anecdotes, I guess, on this to share. But how powerful is it to go after the individual and to make them look amazing and to get them promotions through the value that you can add? How much more impact does that have?
Oh my gosh, it really is tremendous. I mean, I will give you an example. So I was working with an account manager just early this year, and let me take a step back for a moment, because I think the pointy thing here, just before I go into the example, is saying that most businesses or account managers are in places where they're probably looking after an account for about 1 to 2 years, and in that sphere of time, they're usually facing similar challenges or same challenges over and over again. And this is kind of where this person was. He's facing the same challenges over and over again. And what he recognized was that the reason why he was facing those challenges is because his contact was facing the same challenges that he was having in his own business over that 2 year period. And the challenge was getting senior level buy-in into ideas that he thought was best for his department. And so one of the things that we helped him identify here with this person is, first and foremost, where are the major challenges that you are having with influencing within or internally with your business? We've automatically realized that his particular contact doesn't have a great relationship with one of the board level directors, and therefore gets cut down pretty quickly. Through LinkedIn, we discovered that actually there was a mutual connection with one of the directors in his own business, and they set up a joint call where him as the rep, the director of his business, and the board member and his contact could be on the same call discussing the project and get mutual buying on the same call, but giving him the credit for putting the call together. And that for him was the game changer in moving that relationship forward after a 2 year period of struggling, and really kind of seeing that relationship now for that contact shift and change for the better.
I want to end on this because I think this is equally as important as everything we just talked about. So for the sales people listening now that don't have you as a coach, giving them these advice and I guess like any coach, pushing them down the right path even when they don't want to do it. Why or how can we get Sales Nation listening to implement these things when I know as a fact, and you probably do as well from the work you've done and the talks you do and then the people you speak to and all that kind of thing, that say 90% of people will go, that's a really good idea, and then tomorrow they've forgotten it. Are there any steadfast ways to get people to take action on this? Because I think this could be game changing for a lot of especially the more account managing people that are listening.
Yeah, I think there is something really easy. I think it starts with your activity on the Monday morning. If you just get up and simply ask yourself the question, how can I build trust with this one person this week? And choose one thing to do, that is your action And if you can think of one thing to do every single week in terms of building trust or building and deepening a relationship with that one person that's unique and differentiated to that person, I think you'll win every single time because you take yourself out of yourself and move yourself into the position and shoes of the other person.
And again, just to get super practical, say like someone's got 20 accounts they manage. So so when I was in medical devices, I'd say have 50 accounts that I'd manage from across Yorkshire kind of direction.
Yeah.
How many, because of course then there's surgeons in each of these accounts, there's consultants and directors and medical management and all. There's loads of people that you could build useful relationships with that would lead to more revenue over time. How many people should we be trying to build relationships with at once? And how many do we, ish on average, generally, how many do we need to have a strong network?
So I think you need to be looking for the key person of influence. So I'm always looking for one person that's connected to at least 3 different individuals within the sphere of people that I'm looking to connect with. And it's not difficult to find. All you need to do is you can go to LinkedIn and you can find those connections right there, or you can simply ask who within your sphere of influence are people that would be impacted by my service or product that we're sharing together, and simply get their response. But the thing would be to go into that key person of influence, deepen that relationship, and then begin to scale through their own reputation and build your own reputation with them before going to these other different individuals. But once you do, and once you're established with that key person of influence, your reputation will start to speak for itself, because you can then leverage the communication and the goodwill from their own reputation with other people.
And what I'm getting at here as well is, should we start with one person on a Monday, or should we have a list of 10 people that we're working on at once?
So I think start with one, because you want to build in the discipline and the habit of doing it. And doing too many too quickly, you're just going to likely to fail fairly quickly. So just start with the one key person of influence, look for one person connected to 3, and move on from there. Now, there are other ways to kind of automate and kind of get that at a much higher level, at a higher rate. But that's something you can think about much later on.
Well, we can have you back on the show to talk about that in more detail, perhaps a part 2, a more in-depth look at the automation side of things, because that is super important as well. And with that, Jermaine, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, who is the world's greatest salesperson?
So I'm going to go my mum. So the reason why I say that is that I know that my kind of sales roots came from her, and I saw her hustle more than any other person I could ever imagine. And she, just by definition, for the last 33 years that I've known her, every single penny that's come through the door has been through her ability to sell.
Just add a bit of context to that, because I think this is important, and I think that we get a lot more influence from our family than perhaps what we even give them credit for sometimes. What does your mum do or did? And when you say hustle, are you talking about physical effort and sweat and just grinding it out, or are you talking about business acumen and that side of things?
I'm just talking about kind of just hard-nosed grind to the millstone. So I'll give you one very quick example. When you had the catalogs that came out where you could buy something at discount, if you bought within a particular period, I'd see my mum buy literally about 100 pairs of shoes on credit, and then sell them to families who were about to start school for their children for a little bit more. And so those are just some of the things that I saw right from the beginning, right to kind of owning kind of Avon, and literally being the go-to person that people on a street of 50 would go to for every Avon product that she had. And she literally made kind of thousands a week doing that, and continues to do that for a very long time. So
she's clearly an amazing networker, and do you feel that's where you get perhaps some of your talents from?
I'd like to think so. She's definitely a master networker, but definitely some of that entrepreneurial spirit and just a recognition that you have to work to eat.
Amazing stuff. Okay, next one. What is one book or resource other than your own that you'd recommend to the Salesman podcast audience?
A book by Stuart Diamond called Getting More. It's a great book for negotiation and just kind of human psychology altogether.
Amazing. We'll link to that in the show notes over at salesman.red. And one more before the question I ask everyone that comes on the show, Jermaine, that is, what motivates you more than, seeing the people that you work with happy, or, seeing them become more affluent, or the softer stuff like that? What motivates you on a deeper level to close deals and to want to close more of them?
I think partly is actually demonstrating to myself and to my children who see me work that actually there are deeper levels that you can go, and you have deeper capacity to do greater things than you kind of recognize. So I'm always challenging myself to, how fast I can get somebody to make a decision, or how much value can I build into this for this individual, so that they go back and begin to sell on my behalf without me being there. So a number of different metrics that I have for myself, but I think that's really what it is. It's tapping into that capacity. What have I actually got within me?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a two-part question now for the final question. Seeing as you mentioned your kids, the part one is what I ask everyone that comes on the show, which is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling? But answer that and then attack on the end. What's the one piece of advice you'd give your kids if you knew they would listen and take action on it, which I guess is another conversation in itself. But what's the one piece of advice you'd also give your kids to help them succeed in life?
So the big thing I say is that don't do things alone. I'm a big proponent of learning. And so for me, it's just, once you identify the things that you're good at, don't try to focus on your weaknesses. Get around people who are expert at that thing and build a team and learn how to lead people well.
Amazing stuff. Well, Jermaine, always tell us a little bit about your summit that you've got coming up, and the show will be released to coincide with that as well. So everyone listening, if you head over to the link, it'll be available and all ready to go there. But tell us a little bit, because it sounds really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the big idea is the Customer Growth Summit is for sales leaders, the sales leaders that really understand that relationships are a strategic and competitive advantage in this marketplace, or this connection economy. And the whole purpose is to get sales leaders together to really to discover the proven strategies of how to take a customer relationship and turn it into a profitable and strategic advantage that delivers on sales growth for you on a yearly basis. And we've got some great sales leaders and speakers coming from the US, like Bernadette McKillen and Anthony Iannarino, Andy Paul, and some great people from the UK as well. So it's going to be a great fun affair. It's the Customer Growth Summit.
Amazing. Where can we find out more about that? Share a link with us.
Yes, it's the customergrowthsummit.com. And obviously at Summit Growth, so the Twitter handle will be live at the same time as the website, coming very, very soon.
Amazing stuff. We'll link to all that in the show notes for everyone who is on a treadmill or exercising in somewhere in the car at the moment listening to this. Head over to salesman.red and all the links will be in there, including that book that you mentioned earlier. And with that, Jermaine, I want to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman podcast.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
And there we have it. Jermaine, thank you for taking your time to come on the show. I appreciate it, mate. Thank you, Sales Nation, as always, for tuning in. And if you haven't already, you should definitely check out yesterday's show with Andy, where we dive into networking, referrals, and a whole lot more. So, with all that said, I'll speak with you all again on tomorrow's episode.